That high-grade civil servant, Mr. Lee Pemberton, he didn't live in the East End. There they knew which were the victims and...
They were frightened.
The latest butchery has driven the inhabitants of Whitechapel nearly crazy. The murder, or rather the series of murders, has been the one all-absorbing topic of conversation in East London since Saturday morning. And as the evening wore on, and others who had just closed work were made acquainted with the news, the excitement increases apace. Rumours of other murders were set afloat and gained no small amount of credence until East London became panic-stricken. For there is no other term to describe the aimless, frightened way in which the people paraded the crowded thoroughfares. Reports of numerous arrests, too, were made, and thousands of people assembled outside the Lehman Street, Commercial Street, and Bethnal Green police stations and shouted and hooted for the murderer. And the shouts for vengeance which went up from some thousands of throats are no idle threats. The population are in no mood for idle threats or idle words. Suddenly, a cry went up that a man who was passing at the time was the murderer. Suddenly, the cry was taken up on every hand. And in a moment, the unfortunate individual was surrounded by an excited, hooting, yelling mob. Fortunately, the police have been thickly planted. And in a moment, they surround the man, and finding other means of escape useless, placed him in a tramcar and carried him off to an adjoining police station for safety.
The noise of that excited, hooting, yelling mob should have been heard in Whitehall.
They couldn't have been listening.
Or even reading the papers.
The people of Whitechapel, the respectable people of Whitechapel, that is, want more policemen, and not without reason. Wherever you inquire, you get some fresh story of robbery and outrage committed often in broad daylight. A Star reporter this morning made some inquiries in the streets lying between the scenes of the last two murders and found that since the Bucks Row crime, hardly a day has passed unmarked by some brutal assault and robbery. Last Saturday afternoon, a cripple was attacked and robbed of his watch. On Wednesday, a gentleman was robbed in Hanbury Street at 11 o'clock in the morning. In the afternoon of the same day in the same street, another old gentleman was robbed of part of his watch chain, luckily not losing his watch. In Chicksand Street, not 50 yards away, an old man of 70 was robbed. In
Baker's Row.
In Baker's Row, within a stone's throw, a feeble old man was badly beaten with the stick he was walking with. And at night at 10 o'clock in Baker's Row, a young man was the victim of a brutal onslaught because he looked respectable and worth robbing. Whitechapel has always been a rough and not a particularly honest neighbourhood. But the unanimous testimony is that every day Whitechapel is getting worse. The inefficiency of the protection afforded by the police has given Whitechapel over to a reign of terror, and men look on at daylight misdeeds and are afraid to interfere.
Sounds just like New York.
Except for the panic. The East End was already in a panic about what the Ripple would do next. Now the West End started to get into a panic about what the East End would do next.
The editor of the Times, sir. However abhorrent in all cruel, filthy detail are the murders to which the public attention is now so painfully called, they have been the means of affording to us a warning it will be at our extreme peril to neglect. For too long, we have been content to know that within a walk of palaces and mansions, there have existed tens of thousands of our fellow creatures, begotten and reared in an atmosphere of godless brutality. A species of human sewage, the very drainage of the vilest production of ordinary vice. Just so long as the dwelling of this race continues in their present condition, their whole surroundings a sort of warren of foul alleys, garnished with the flaring lamps of the gin shops, and offering to all sorts of lodgers, for all conceivable wicked purposes, every possible accommodation to further brutalize, we shall have to go on assuming astonishment that in such a state of things we have outbreaks from time to time of the horrors of the present day. Sewer gas will sometimes explode, but this work of hand can remedy. Where shall we find the remedy when this moral sewage attains the full development of which these murders are a mere passing example. Yours, Sidney Godolphin Osborne.
It was this other letter. This and the postcard that really stirred them up. The ones the newspapers printed on the front pages. Dear boss, I keep hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fit. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal.
How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You'll soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha.
The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officer just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back until I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife is nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I can get a chance. Good luck, yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now, ha-ha. The P.S. is in a different handwriting. Well, it sort of matches the postcard there.
They're both different from the letter that Lusk received with Edo's kidney.
Oh.
So our boy disguised his writing?
All these others are from a nut?
The police took that one and the postcard seriously. They even issued them on this poster, hoping that somebody might recognize the handwriting. After all, the postcard did predict the double event.
I wasn't codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number 1 squealed a bit. Oh, no.
Couldn't finish straight off, hadn't time to get ears for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again, Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, but the double event was September the 30th.
Yeah. And the postmark is October the 1st. What does that 7 mean? The time?
No. Collecting times didn't turn up on postmarks until 1900. Now, that 7 would be the post office clerk's number. But he could have been stamping the first post, the last, or any in between.
Even if it was first post on Monday morning, it'd still be at least 5 hours after Edo's death, and by that time the whole of the East End and the city would have heard about the double event.
So these needn't have been written by the Ripper after all?
Leaving us with just the Lusk letter.
Has the handwriting on this been analysed?
Yes, by a Canadian named MacLeod in The Criminologist in 1968. The usual stuff about angular connections do show unusual drive and generally some lack of sympathy for one's fellows.
Oh, brilliant. Anything more useful?
He agrees about the Lusk letter being the most likely to be genuine. And then he says, I would say that this writer was capable of conceiving any atrocity and of carrying it out in an organized way.
Killer's bad enough. Organized killer's worse. But an organized killer is mad as well.
So, half London terrified, the other half getting terrified and feeling guilty. They needed someone to blame. So they looked around for a scapegoat.
Us.
Who else?
Is it not monstrous that the police do not protect us from these flagrant and ghastly nuisances?
It's a funny way to describe the murder.
Oh, he wasn't describing the murders, just some of their effects.
Sir, can nothing be done to prevent a set of horse ruffians coming nightly about our suburban squares and streets, yelling at the tops of their hideous voices, Special Edition, Whitechapel Murder, Special Edition, Awful Murder, and nearly frightening the life out of the sensitive women and children of the neighborhood? Last evening, for instance, their cry was special, murder, paper, the Ripper. These awful words were bawled out at about 9 o'clock in a quiet part of Kensington. A lady who was supping with us was so greatly distressed by these hideous bellowings that she was absolutely too unnerved to go home, save in a cab, because she would have to walk about 100 yards at the end of her journey by omnibus. Now, I venture to ask, sir, is it not monstrous that the police do not protect us from these flagrant and ghastly nuisances? I enclose my card, sir, and beg to subscribe myself Pembroke Square.
Some people.
It all helped to spark off the big guns. This is powerful fire.
The Star, largest circulation of any evening paper in the kingdom. What we think. The blood of the murdered women in the East End still cries for vengeance. So far as we can gather from the contradictory and meaningless reports of the police, the arrests already made do not promise a solution of the mystery. Whitechapel is crying out for a reward, and its tradesmen have actually clubbed their shillings in default of the action which any wise or even sane administration would at once have made. Would have made I, if the murders had occurred in the West End instead of in the East, and if the victims had been ladies instead of the most helpless and outcast class in the community. It is impossible to exaggerate the utter want of confidence in the whole police system which this frightful tragedy has evoked. And sheer fright grows into crazed fury, then we shall hold Mr. Matthews and Sir Charles Warren responsible. We assert that Sir Charles Warren has employed and is employing a daily increasing number of his skilled men not to protect the lives of the poor, but to look after the property of the rich. And generally by making war on what Sir Charles Warren imagines to be the advances of social revolution. The natural end to this is the Whitechapel Holocaust. There may be worse to come. The sooner, therefore, that the West End understands that life is as precious in Whitechapel hovels as in Belgravian mansions, the better for its social peace, and the greater its chance of disposing of its own industrious maniac when once he has set up in business.
Nice, cheerful threat.
Wasn't only the pop papers on the rampage. Your respected Daily Telegraph let rip too.
The fact can no longer be disguised that the Home Secretary now in office is a source of miserable weakness and discredit to the present administration. In the House of Commons, he has been nothing more nor less than a fantastic failure. And in the provinces, he is scarcely known even by name. And when the provincials do become aware of him, it is only to mistrust him and to express disrespectful and indignant astonishment that a government, otherwise so capable, so popular, should drag with it a dead weight of so much vacillation, so much ineptitude, and so many frankly naive confessions of crass ignorance concerning things of which the most commonplace Home Secretary ought to be fully cognizant. Mr. Matthews does not know. He is not aware. He does not remember, or he has not heard, things which to an ordinary intelligent man should be as manifest as the sun at noonday. Very likely, Mr. Matthews is, in many respects, an excellent man. It is high time for him to go and excel somewhere else.
Mr. Matthews is a feeble mountebank who would pose and simper over the brink of a volcano. And worse is Sir Charles Warren, who, finding the police force out of hand, disorganizes it utterly, and believing he had a genius for stamping out dangerous social tendencies, left the social facts at his feet. Let the rank crop of crime and misery grow untouched and uncared for. Unfortunately, we can't impeach Sir Charles Warren. He stands rooted in his self-conceit and his fanaticism. But we can reach Mr. Matthews. And every newspaper in London but the Times is for getting rid of our never-at-home secretary.
We have had enough of Mr. Home Secretary Matthews. It is high time that this helpless minister should be promoted out of the way of some more competent man. No patching or tinkering up will satisfy the public. It is clear that the detective department of Scotland Yard is in an utterly hopeless and worthless condition. For ourselves, we do not intend to hold our hand until a clean sweep of impotence and red tape is made at Scotland Yard.
Reasonable demand? Where was their brand new director of CID at this precise moment? Still in Switzerland?
On his way from holiday in Switzerland to stay in Paris, to be near at hand if he was wanted.
And they weren't calling for his head?
They were looking for bigger, if not better, heads. And now it wasn't just the newspapers.
At 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, a meeting of nearly 1,000 persons took place in Victoria Park. After several speeches upon the conduct of the Home Secretary and Sir Charles Warren, a resolution was unanimously passed that it was high time both officers should resign and make way for some officers who would leave no stone unturned for the purpose of bringing the murderers to justice instead of allowing them to run riot in a civilized city like London. On Mile End Waste during the same day, 4 meetings of the same kind were held and similar resolutions passed. The ladies of Whitechapel addressed a petition to the Queen.
This new, most ghastly murder shows the absolute necessity for some very decided action. All these courts must be lit and our detectives improved. They are not what they should be.
Hear, hear.
Well, not so simple. Our detectives improved. My foot, they hardly even existed. CID as a department was new then anyway.
Get away.
There was no criminal investigation department in Lancashire, our pride and joy, until 1917.
So, no jacks, no forensic, no real photographs, no radio, no telephone, no crime cars. It hardly seems fair, even on a clot like Warren.
Life in the police service is never fair, as Warren found out.
The Ripper finished him off.
Must have been his finest hour.
Warren's?
The Rippers. I wonder where he was exactly when he heard of Warren's resignation. Must have been a great moment. The Queen writes sharp letters to the Prime Minister about you. The Chief Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police resigns. The Home Secretary fights for his political life. There's even a special cabinet meeting just to discuss the murders. That's when the pardon was agreed.
Here we are. Whereas on November the 8th or 9th in Miller's Court, Dorset Street, Spitalfields, Mary Jane Kelly was murdered by some person or persons unknown, the Secretary of State will advise the grant of Her Majesty's pardon to any accomplice not being a person who contrived or actually committed the murder, who shall give such information and evidence as shall lead to the discovery and conviction of the person or persons who committed the murder. Quite a compliment.
Yeah, particularly since the pardon didn't work. Any more than the rewards they'd all been shouting for did, even though the City of London had chipped in because Catherine Eddowes had been killed on their patch. And they went higher than Mr. Lusk and his Whitechapel traders.
£500.
Better than 2,000 florins.
And just as useless. Because after that, the Ripper went on and killed Kelly.
The remains of the unfortunate woman, Marie Jeanette Kelly, who was murdered on November the 9th in Miller's Court, Dorset Street, Spitalfields, were conveyed on Monday from Shoreditch Mortuary to the Roman Catholic Cemetery at Leytonstone for interment amidst a scene of turbulent excitement. On the afternoon of the murder, the body of the murdered woman had been conveyed to the mortuary attached to St. Leonard's Church, Shoreditch, and there it remained until Monday. Since the inquest, a great amount of sympathy for the fate of the unhappy creature has been created, but it remained for Mr. H. Wilton, the sexton attached to Shoreditch Church, to put sympathy into practical form. And as no relatives have appeared, he incurred the total cost of the funeral himself. The body was enclosed in a polished elm and oak coffin with metal mounts. On the coffin plate were engraved the words, Marie Jeanette Kelly, died 9th of November, 1888, aged 25 years. Upon the coffin were 2 crowns of artificial flowers and a cross made up of heartsease. The coffin was carried in an open car drawn up by 2 horses, and 2 coaches followed. An enormous crowd assembled at an early hour, completely blocking the thoroughfare, and a large number of police were engaged in keeping order. The bell of St. Leonard's began tolling at noon, and the signal appeared to draw all the residents in the neighborhood together. There was an enormous preponderance of women in the crowd, and scarcely any had any covering to their heads. The wreaths upon the coffin bore cards inscribed with remembrances from friends using certain public houses in common with the murdered woman. As the coffin appeared, borne on the shoulders of 4 men at the principal gate of the church. The crowd appeared to be greatly distressed. Round the open car in which it was to be placed, men and women struggled desperately to get to touch the coffin. Women with faces streaming with tears cried out, "God forgive her!" and every man's head was bared in token of sympathy. The sight was quite remarkable, and the emotion natural and unconstrained. 2 mourning coaches followed, one containing 3 and the other 5 persons. Mourners who had been fortifying themselves for the journey at the public house close to the church gates. Joe Barnett was amongst them, with someone from McCarthy's, the landlord, and others were women who had given evidence at the inquest. After a tremendous struggle, the car, with the coffin fully exposed to view, set out at a very slow pace, all the crowd appearing to move off simultaneously in attendance. The traffic was blocked, and the constables had great difficulty in obtaining free passage for the small procession through the mass of carts, vans, and tramcars.
So, with the mobs out of the way, perhaps detection can start.
Well, we're both Jacks. Do you think we can place this knave?